the aerial view of the fitness industry, show number 8. Now, this show has come about because many of you are working so hard in your businesses, you don't actually get a chance to pop your head up and see what's going on around the world or what's even happening in your local industry. So I go after world leaders in our industry who are across multiple industry sectors and multiple countries to give you a truly aerial view of the industry. Now, what you'll love about this series is that I chew the thin with this international legend in a raw and authentic interview. There is no editing, and I've got absolutely no idea what our guest will say. So it could go anywhere. So far, I've chatted with Paul Brown, Ryan Hogan, Ian Mullane, Matthew Janisak, Dave Wright, Chris Stevenson, and Jack Thomas. These chats can all be seen on the Active Management YouTube channel. And today I'm super stoked to be joined by Richard Beddie from New Zealand. G'day, Richard.
G'day, JT.
That's a terrible accent, I know.
It is.
Richard is the CEO of Exercise New Zealand, and he's also the Chief of Staff for ICREPS, which is the International Confederation of Registered Exercise Professionals. That's got to be the longest acronym for an industry body, I think, in the world as well.
Yeah, that's why they call it ICREPS. So otherwise, it's just too long.
Richard is, I would regard, as one of the widest reading, broadest reading people in our industry who looks outside our industry, has conversations outside our industry. So today's conversation really literally could go anywhere, and he's given me the okay to wave him down if he goes off on a tangent. But he is an all-round ripper guy who absolutely knows what he's talking about and has the industry at true heart value. Like, he really wants to help you guys all over the world get your clubs reopen safely, and getting back into business. Now, I have to admit, we were going to do this interview last week, and we were going to have Richard on for him to be the shining light across the globe, because New Zealand were kicking some pandemic serious ass, and then all of a sudden, things went pear-shaped. So, Richard, welcome, and tell us what the hell is happening in New Zealand.
Yeah, well, it was an interesting one, wasn't it? Literally a week ago, we'd be going, look how well we're doing. By the way, these are all the lessons. If you just do what we do, everything will be fine. It just goes to show, if there's one thing, to talk to the international audience, this goes to show it can change so rapidly. Whether it's another shutdown, whether it's another outbreak, whether it's just a government reacts in a different way, and all these things we don't get to control. We get to influence some of them, maybe around the margins, but certainly things like outbreaks we don't get to control. Not even the government gets to control that, even when they're doing that or they're trying to do their job. And so, we've gone back to the scenario where literally 24 hours is a long time. We have a safety framework for our industry, and we advise the industry on this is what you should do. Since last Wednesday, when we put out our new framework in response to the government's lockdown, we've changed it 6 times. And when I say changed it, we've updated it and tweaked it. But the fact that literally every day we're changing it at least once, sometimes twice, and saying, hey, the new update's out. Why? Because the government continues to change its rules and its policies and its guidance on everything from masks to contact tracing to you name it. And that's okay. We understand that. But it means that we're like the rest of the world. We're this, what's going to happen next week? I couldn't tell you. What's going to happen next month? If you start crystal ball gazing that too far, I have no idea. I mean, we're still, for example, in our country, we are saying we're going to run a conference face-to-face in November. We've made that call. And we made that call during lockdown.
Well, let's come back to that.
Yeah.
So just for people that are who have no idea about New Zealand, it's a beautiful country, lots of lovely people there, and a world champion rugby team. The virus has broken out, hotspots in Auckland. So Auckland's shut down, but the rest of the country is open.
Correct. So the very brief version is we have a level system like most of the world, level 1 to level 4, level 1 being the lightest. We were in level 1 for 100 days. So level 1 means you don't have to do anything. You don't have to contact trace. You don't have to social distance. You can sit with a stranger at a cafe and share a coffee cup if you want. So literally there was no rules. The big rules were if you were sick, stay at home, and there were border controls. So you couldn't come into the country if you weren't a Kiwi, and if you were, straight into managed isolation. Now, What happened was something didn't work. Either the managed isolation didn't work, or somehow someone who was involved in that got the virus out. Now here, I'm not here to make judgment, just to try to what happened. So as a result, the virus got back into the community. Remember, we're at level 1, so we were like everyone was pre-COVID. We were doing things that would absolutely spread the virus. So when they found out they had one case, actually it wasn't one case. It's now up to probably 30 or 40. I think literally every day is another dozen or so, because of course we weren't doing controls. So unlike the rest of the world, we were doing nothing because we had zero community virus. Now we're back. Yeah.
So over that 100 days, did gyms, personal training studios, fitness studios just return almost
Correct.
Business as usual?
100% to normal. So we went through the levels from 4, which was complete lockdown, 3, which is basically lockdown plus fast food. Level 2 is what we call controlled. So controlled, gyms can open, restaurants can open, but with a lot of control. So social distancing, contact tracing, cleaning, and what have you. Now that level, you'd move the bikes apart in a cycling class. You would stand further apart in group X. When we went to level 1, that's all gone. We were back to, if I'm cycling here, you are next to me, and if I put like that, I'm going to hit you in the. But that's because that's what we're used to, right? That's what you do in a cycling class. But level 1 was exactly.
What was the consumer's response? Like, did they jump back into those classes? Yep. I mean, this is a fascinating thing for the rest of the world to look at. What was the result?
So the one thing I'd say, and this is really interesting, we were very careful. Like, how much quickly will things go back? What will this new term, the new normal, look like? How reluctant will people to go back to spaces where you're sharing it with other people? The one thing I can tell you from a New Zealand perspective, when you're allowed to do whatever you want, people quickly go back to that. They basically were in. Now, if you look at our numbers, we were back to 90% within 3 weeks. Now, of course, within 90%, there's variation. Some would have been 70, some would have been 110. But when the industry at an average of 90% visits and about 90% revenue and think something like 90-something% sales, most would go, I'm pretty happy with 90, right? 90's sustainable. It's not great long term, but I'll take 90 and I'll rebuild my business. So the fact that people went so quickly back to what I'd call the normal, the things that I used to do, I go into the cafe and I just have a cup of coffee, I sit down, and no one was going, oh, well, I want to walk outside now because I don't want, no, we wanted old. We wanted what we used to have. And I say that as a we, the collective. Yeah. And it's very interesting that you see that same behavior in a way when people are in lockdown. There are some people that are very compliant, but there's a whole lot of people, I just want it the way it was. Now, we can argue whether that's right or wrong, but they do. They want it how it was. I want to be able to walk on the beach, even if the government says I shouldn't. I want to go to the gym, even though the government says it's not safe or whatever the rule is. And so the one thing that I think is really positive in this, once you can reopen, whatever that is, and whatever framework you are modeling under, whatever government rules, the customer, in the most part, wants to come back. Now, there will always be the scenario of what if you've got rampant virus in your community? That will be another factor. Now, assuming it's not rampant and that you've got background virus, you will still find the vast majority, and I say this as a generalization, the vast majority want to go back, and that is good. Now, they'll always, and you manage what about our over 80s class. I think it's a good idea to can your over 80s class for a while, do that virtually, or do some other mechanism where you can serve them. But we're talking about the masses. They want it, you want it, bring them on in within safety protocols, of course.
Now you use that 90% figure, which is a terrific figure.
Yeah. From
the members of Exercise New Zealand, did they see an uplift in inquiries and sales when the doors were allowed to reopen? And did that kind of stay at that pace for that 100 days, or did they come out of the blocks hard and then start die? The old Ben Johnson effect, out of the blocks hard and then die towards the end of the 100 metres when the drugs wear off?
So I think the answer to that is yes and yes, but overall it was still pretty good. So yes, we saw an initial peak. It was that some clubs were reporting over 100% of sales. So the metrics we asked 3 was visits. That's how much people are using it. And that's almost going to tell you your long-term success, because if people use you, you'll be fine. If people don't use you, you're in trouble. But it's revenue, which is almost like your instant success, because if you've got money today, that's good. But if your visits are down and your money is up, probably in the long term, your money is going to come to match your visits. And the third one we asked was new sales. And that's probably the most important of the 3, although not the one that most people look at straight away, because I'm just trying to get my business back up to opening, right? So I'm concerned about visits. I'm kind of interested in money. not maybe the other way around, but new sales is kind of nice to have. But actually what that tells us is the health of the public's willingness to engage with us as a new customer. And that's really good, because that was actually the highest of the three stats, which is really good to see. So a lot of clubs went above 100% and then came back to about 90. But it predominantly was maintained. There was a few ups and downs, but it did not drop off fundamentally. And that's positive. What has happened though, we've noticed this already, we've gone back to what we call level 2 for the whole country, and level 3, which is basically a lockdown for Auckland. And the whole country, the sales have dropped. So even though the clubs are all open, there's capacity restraints. If you're a new member, you're going, right now, would I join a gym? Probably not. And I'm not saying they shouldn't, but the mental sort of mindset is, would I try a new activity right now? No, right now, I'm going back to, I'm hunkering down a little bit. And that could be physically or just emotionally. Like we all do that. You're like, oh, there's another shock to the system. The whole of New Zealand was used to no rules. Now, all of a sudden, when I go in, I need to wash my hands. I need to socially distance. You know, the saunas are off. Oh, that's a different world to my old world, which I could do whatever I want.
That's really interesting. So are you seeing from across the industry with this, and it's not even a lockdown, but this second ripple, not quite even a wave, even though it's only in one part of the country, it's impacting the entire country. Are club owners adjusting or studio owners adjusting their business model yet? Or do you think that's going to, like when I say business model, like looking at their expenses and making some changes there soon, or have they done it straight away? Or
most of them have already done it from round one. And I mean, and because we did a full close and a full reopen. So I realize every country is different. Some are literally still in the closure stage, but there were kind of partial reopenings or sort of closures and then sort of reopenings and then sort of closures again, or very strict rules. When we were open, we had pretty good rules. So we had our recommendation was 2 meter social distancing, 6 foot in a group exercise setting, which is a bit restrictive, but it's none of this no more than 10 in a gym kind of, excuse my language, rubbish. Actually, I was going to say more than that. That's why I said excuse my language. So you can imagine, put a swear word in front of it, because it's bullshit, because there are a number of governments who just make stuff up, who say, you were telling me about a US state where it's like, what is it? 10% of capacity. Well, where's the science behind that? I don't have a problem if they say, right now it's not safe and these are the reasons. I might get frustrated I couldn't open, but if there's good evidence, I can understand it. But when you say 10% capacity, it either is or it is not safe. And if it is safe to operate at all, then give me the evidence. Is it 2 meters you want? Is it 3 meters? Are you doing an extra buffer of 50% more? But don't tell me 10% capacity, because that's just a made up number. There is no science. WHO never says 10%. They might say more than 2 meters because of blah, or they might say masks are compulsory because of the increased viral load, but they would never say 10% because that's just a made up number. No one knows where that came from. So,
especially if I just drive down the road and cross the border and it's like 80% capacity.
Exactly. Yeah. And this is where, in fact, our advice to the industry has always been, we need to be doing a little bit more than everyone else. So for example, and this, some people in the industry don't like me saying this, there are additional risks associated with exercise, particularly inside in a facility. But here's the thing, we can manage them. So you are increased respiration rates and you're hanging around the same person for 60 minutes. We'll call that a group exercise class. Now that is different to the rest of, to a supermarket, to a shop, to even places where you might interact for an extended period, but you don't stand closely to them and you don't stand close to the next same person. Even a restaurant, normally speaking, it's the people at your table, but you then contact trace that table. You don't have to worry about that table kind of thing. Whereas in a group exercise setting, it's different. Now, that doesn't mean to say it's not safe. It's just we need additional protocols. And so people go, I'll just follow the government guidance. Well, no, they're just giving generic stuff. We need to come up with additional protocols. And we can manage it very easily. A little bit of social distancing, a little bit of contact tracing and some additional hygiene matters. It's not hard. Wipe down your bars when you share them, because you normally don't share equipment. And for example, in a restaurant, you don't normally share a plate. Someone else washes it. But in a gym, you share something and no one washes it in between. That's okay. We'll do it ourselves. So this isn't rocket science, but we do need to admit it, be upfront with it, and then address it. It's all about, health and safety 101. Identify the risks, manage them, and then you've got a residual risk. I believe with doing those controls, we have a lower residual risk than most activities.
Yeah.
Why? Because we give a damn. And you see it with, if I pick on other industries, restaurants, hospitality, some of them don't seem to care in the slightest. Now, some of them do, but I'll say there's enough high profile cases where it shows they don't care. As an industry, we need to show we do. So we can, I think I said this to you a few times over the last month or so. I think the approach of saying we have to open because we need to survive, while I understand it and I have sympathy for it, it isn't an argument to a politician who is saying we have to close for safety. So the argument needs to be, we can operate safely. This is how we'll do it. Please let us open. Now, it's the same end result, please let us open, but the discussion is not because we'll go under, because to be honest, that's not a rationale for a politician who says, I'm trying to look after the safety of my people here.
Yeah,
it resonates with me. I used to run a gym like you did, JT, and I look back and go, I wouldn't have survived this. I'll be really honest. We would have run out of cash already. And we're, I think, a pretty robust business, or we'd have to radically change what we did. I had 2 gyms. One of them probably would have been okay, maybe because it was a boutique club and I could just close everything down for 6 months. But the other one, no, we'd be out. And we'd still have a lease for the next 3 years. So, we'd be in pain. So the argument needs to be, we can do this safely. This is how we'll do it. Please let us open, not please let us open or else we'll go under. Because as much as the other one has a lot of sympathy for a lot of people, it doesn't work on most politicians around the globe.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I love that. I think that's a great takeaway for anyone watching who's trying to do a deal with a politician in any way, shape or form. Can I ask you this? I mean, you obviously are a learned man who looks at lots of countries, and you are the contact for the industry in New Zealand with the government. Am I right in saying that really the government has NFI about our industry?
In the most part, yes. Now, there'll be the odd, politician that someone can point out and say, no, they understand how it works. They still think of us, in the most part, as a physical activity, probably a sport, even though we know we're not a sport, but they kind of group us, your sporting activities. And the reality is, in fact, sporting activities around COVID have their own risks, particularly contact sports and sports where you've got lots of spectators, because spectators are your risk vector in most sports. It's not the players. And I'm talking not about the Super 12 rugby game. I'm talking about the casual rugby game on a Saturday afternoon where a bunch of people come to the edge of the field, look, at the end of the game, walk away. Well, where's your contact tracing? And that's normal, right? That's how we've done it for the last 100 years. It's just, no, sorry, in COVID, that doesn't work. So they're quite paranoid about that kind of activity, and we're lumped in with them. So one of the things we've tried to do in New Zealand is separate us from what I call gyms and bars. So we're not like them, we're not high risk, but also separate us from gyms and sport. We're not sport either. We're a controlled environment with actually X's marks the spot in our group exercise rooms with 50 different cleaning things all around the space. That's nothing like sport. And I'm not trying to pick on sport here. I'm just trying to differentiate. If there is something else that is seen in a negative way, then we need to be different to that. And so we are a controlled environment. We are a contact traced environment, even without any rules. We do it already. It's called the swipe card. And so there are things that we can do. And I think the one thing I'd noticed with government, they don't really get us. The odd politician might, but on the most part, they don't. And even in the health sector, as much as they know the benefits of activity, I think every country in the world has been really positive in saying, when you're in lockdown, about the only thing you're allowed to do is exercise, which I think is fantastic. There's a huge opportunity there, and it's probably a whole different conversation, but that is good, and they understand the value, but they don't understand the value of what I'll call gyms or providers of activity that in a structured way, which may be a gym or a mobile trainer or whatever it is, a yoga studio. All of those have a huge value. They don't understand our role in that.
So the silver lining really for every country is we are at least speaking to government.
Yep.
And all of a sudden now we're on the radar, whereas we weren't on the radar previously. All governments love some form of regulation, some form of quality control. And if I can ask you to put your ICREPS hat on for a moment, in essence, ICREPS is the international body around governing qualifications for trainers, group fitness instructors, people that work in our industry. What's the pandemic done for that part of the business, that part of the industry across the world?
So in pretty much every country that has a registration body that's a member of ICREPS, the registration body is voluntary. So you don't have to be registered. So one of the things that's happened as a result of this, and it's true of registration bodies as it is of industry bodies actually, is the registration numbers on the most part have actually gone up. And part of that is being part of something bigger than you. So I often say, if you don't understand why you should be part of your association now, there's probably nothing I can say that would convince someone. You know, if you're in the US and you haven't joined IRSA, you know, why not? Because IRSA is doing amazing work. And if you don't know what they're doing, that's because you're not a member and you wouldn't know. But they're doing so much work. And you know, I look at the US, it's a mess for lots of reasons, but one of the big reasons is, of course, is the multiple states involved. So IRSA is tracking legislations at 50 state levels, also trying to work at the federal level, and also trying to keep open themselves while they're supporting their own market. And of course, they're doing international collaboration. I mean, there's a weekly meeting that we have between associations, which is fantastic, by the way. That's where we share information. The other day, I heard about Ireland about to reopen and what they're learning. You know, obviously, up until now, as New Zealand was, well, we're ahead of everyone. Well, now I'm going back to Australia and going, hey, you guys went through lockdown number 2. What can I learn from you to share with our industry? So, and that's the great thing about this industry. There is a huge collaboration, even not only at an industry level, but I'll say a competitor level. I don't think, like many, that the club down the road is the competitor. But even if we use that word, at the end of the day, the challenge we have is getting people to re-engage with us, whether it's next week or next month or in 6 months' time when we're allowed to do what we're supposed to do. But that is the challenge, not anything else. And if we can collaborate and work together, we don't see it in many other industries. Lots of other industries are still fighting each other within the industry, and they don't have a collective voice to government and to the public through the media, all those kind of things. And that's where the role of registration bodies and associations, you know, if Fitness Australia, the stuff that Fitness Australia is doing at the moment is fantastic. You don't have to agree with everything they're doing, but fundamentally they are there to advocate on behalf of the industry. They've made some big wins and they've got some big struggles as well, because, you know, as we know, it's difficult to change the mind of government. So it's not like everything you want you're going to get, but the only way you're going to get any of it is if you work together. And, you know, you've already got the structure. In Australia, it's Fitness Australia. In US, it's IRSA. You know, in the UK, it's UK Active UK. Sorry.
So, do you think the pandemic will, when we come out of this, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, or 18 months, do you think there'll be a greater value put on registration of our trainers, the same value, or less value?
I think trainers will put more value on it. I think public, probably, I don't necessarily think will change drastically. I think there's some other dynamics that will change in that space. I think trainers will value it more because a trainer who understands, like right now, if you're in, you know, Melbourne, Victoria, and you've been closed for the last, you know, a couple of months, and you were open for 10 days and then closed for 3 months before that, or in many states in the US where you go, I'm alone, you know, I'm a trainer in a club, but at the end of the day, the club's got its own challenges. And I'm just going, what the hell, what am I going to do? Being part of something bigger than you, that isn't just the club or the chain, but actually the industry. So that's your link in, and particularly where industry bodies work alongside registration bodies. So Australia and New Zealand is similar, where they are one and the same, although, you know, there's reps, but there's Fitness Australia, or in New Zealand we've got Exercise New Zealand and reps. But working together is really good, because at the end of the day, it's the same industry, whether we're dealing with the club or the trainer or the group exercise instructor or the yoga teacher. We're trying to support those people to do what they do, both in a financial sense of here's the stuff the government can give you to keep alive, but also in the what are we going to do in 3 months and 6 months' time when you reopen. And I think the trainer will value it more. Again, a trainer that's switched on would absolutely value it more.
And do you think the government are going to come back and say things like, post-pandemic, you know, we've seen the impact of the pandemic on the health of people, so we're happy to fund, and I'm using air commas there, who knows what that actually means, fund some sort of program for the consumer, but the club has to meet standards of your national body, or the trainers have to be registered with a national body or international body. Do you think that will happen like we've always wanted, or do you think that idea of funding is not even on the...
If I'm totally honest, right now, without some major change, no. Because what you're saying is, do you think post-pandemic the government will be willing to spend money on a thing when they're all going to be in massive deficit? So I'm not saying they shouldn't, because you and I would agree they should, and that's a good idea, and that's the mechanism you'd use. But do you think there'll be appetite for it? I think the answer is there'll be a very small appetite for it. I think the opportunity, though, there, and again, if you think otherwise and you want to go ahead, and not you personally, but anyone who's listening wants to take that and run with it, please do, because I would agree with you, it's a good idea. But in terms of you asking the question, do I think the government will want to do it? I think their initial response would be, no thanks, we don't want to spend any money right now. We're trying to cut our cloth. You know, this is 2021, 2022, when they've all figured out they've got 50 billion, or in the case of the US, $50 trillion of debt. How are we going to get out of this? Well, actually spending money is probably not their first choice. But the one thing that I think is the huge opportunity for us is what up until now has been called mental health. And I'm going to suggest we change that to social well-being. And the reason we do, in the same reason that we didn't say social distancing, we started to say physical distancing, because we're not actually trying to avoid socializing. We're trying to be physically distant. I can still talk to you from 2 meters. Mental health has a bunch of connotations, and it is generally seen as mental illness, and it's negative. And it's great now that we can talk about depression, and we can talk about anxiety, and the fact that, hey, I used to suffer from it and that's okay. And the fact that people can say that and not be judged. In the same way, if I had cancer, you wouldn't judge me. You'd say, shit, that's terrible. Glad you haven't got it anymore. I used to have anxiety, now I don't, or I still suffer from it occasionally. Wow, thanks for sharing. I didn't realize people like you did that. That kind of stuff is so valuable. But mental health, the words often have connotations. If you ask allied health professionals, they'll all say, use the term social well-being. But if I go back to that now, that has the biggest opportunity for us moving forward, because the one thing I can tell about COVID, and this is true of every country in the world, your social well-being takes a hammering. Even if you're the most secure person financially and emotionally, and in your relationship and in your house and your family, tell you what, you throw something like COVID at it and it can mess it up. You know, all of a sudden you got 3 teenagers running around your house, and as much as you love your children, you probably want to strangle them right now, you know, and it's okay, because that's normal. I don't mean you should actually strangle them, but it's normal that you want to, because that is what happens when you have them in your house for 4 weeks while you're trying to work. You know, dad needs to do the work in the office right now. Thanks. And that's just one example of 100 other challenges that are, I don't know your life. How could I possibly tell you how you should feel right now? So social well-being will be a massive challenge for people. And if I jump to, what does that mean for us? Physical activity is absolutely a crucial part of the solution. And I do say part, because it's not the only thing. There are so many other things that need to be in place. If we talk about, physical abuse of spousal abuse, physical activity is not the solution to that. The one person getting some treatment is probably the solution to that. So to say we are the solution to social well-being is not true. We are absolutely a major part of it, though. And post-COVID, social well-being, and put in brackets mental health, will be a far more significant thing than it's ever been. And the good thing about the last 5 years leading up to this, the ability to have the conversation around it has never been greater. If you went back 5 years, you'd go, no one talks about that stuff. Don't talk about mental health, certainly depression. You don't talk about that one. No one talks about suicide. Suicide, I think in your country is the same as ours. When they report it, they don't even say suicide. They say a person died of natural causes.
Yes, it's exactly
in their 40s. And you're going, how's a person in their 40s died? And then they were found in their home and the family is asking for, oh, I see. And I get why they do, because they don't want copycatting. But the problem is, until we say, by the way, so-and-so, who had a wonderful life, killed themselves, because that happens all the time. We need to be upfront about it. Now, obviously, I'm no expert in the space, whether or not it should be in the media, but to be able to have the conversation is so valuable. And so we are absolutely part of the social well-being sort of wave post-COVID.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So do you think, last question for you, do you think if you gaze into the crystal ball, is that our number one platform that we start to look at as an industry, that it is, I love that phrase, social well-being, or, you know, what's your prediction for the industry moving forward? And I'm going to hold you to this, because in a month's time, it's all going to change.
Totally, exactly.
Look, taking into account what you said earlier, things do change so rapidly. 24 hours almost feels like a month for some people. So it's hard to put a time frame on what the future is. But gazing into the crystal ball, what do you think it looks like?
So I think never forget the basics of what the industry is about. So moving forward into the future, and I say it, so it's, no, we're not talking 10 years time, we're talking, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months time. So in the near future, but not the immediate future, not next week. I think predominantly our industry will still be delivering the same kind of benefits to predominantly the same kind of people. And by the way, that's okay. That's the people we serve. That's the people we help, with a little bit of, we can help these extra people a bit more, or this group, or, let's have a lower price product, all that stuff. But we've been doing that already. So there will continue to be a growth of and breadth of our industry. But fundamentally, if I go forward, even 12, 18 months, we'll be the same industry. So is mental health the new thing? Yes, but it's not a replacement for what we're currently doing. We still do. And people say, oh, we're in the health industry. I go, I actually disagree. I think we provide health benefits. Health is one of the things we do. If you are 20 and you're going to the gym, it's perfectly okay to go to the gym for big muscles. It's perfectly okay to go to the gym to lose some weight.
Well.
Yep.
It's not okay if you're 20 to do bicep curls in the squat rack.
In the squat rack. I agree. That should be illegal. And if there is going to be one new rule post-COVID, that will be a thing.
Yep. Let's legislate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep, we're in. We'll start that here. You can note that, 18th of August, 2020. But, it's okay that that's part of our industry. And again, I'm not saying that is the main part. If we look at the transition, that used to be almost the whole part of it. And now it's grown, which is great. But it's okay to say that's part of it, just as it's okay to say we have special classes for Parkinson's, those suffering from Parkinson's, and it's, literally some of them are sitting in chairs and we're moving their arm. That's fantastic. But they're both part of it. And it's not to say, oh, now the new thing is social wellbeing. So it's a part of the mix. It's not a replacement for anything. So moving forward, don't forget what you did and why you did it. So whatever your product is, if it's yoga, go back to yoga. If it used to be high intensity interval training, running people on the beach until they want to throw up, that's a great product too. Do that. So don't sort of say, oh, the new thing has to be this, but how might you see the opportunity for the new space of social wellbeing as it emerges post-COVID, and as people understand the one thing, going back to what I said earlier, we were all told you're allowed to exercise. Now you and I go, well, of course, I'm going to do it anyway. But there are a whole bunch of Australians, New Zealanders, Americans, all around the globe who, for the first time in maybe the last 20 years, actually went out for a walk. Yep. Why? Because they're in bloody lockdown. You go, I just want to get out of my house. And you know what they experienced for the first time in 20 years? Oh, that feels kind of nice. Now, they didn't lose weight. They didn't actually they maybe elevated their heart rate. Maybe they didn't. They probably didn't do anything physiological to their body much at all. Now, someone who's an expert will say, well, actually they did. But they probably got a little bit of a dopamine hit. But what they did do is they felt really good by taking some breaths of fresh air. And then that was kind of cool. Now, here's the opportunity. Would you like to feel that every day? Well, you can. And you probably won't be going for a walk, will you? Because, it's not a thing. I'm not locked up in my house anymore. Well, you can come to the gym, or you can come to my studio, or you can come to my whatever. I'm mobile. I'll come to you. That is a huge opportunity. And the reason I say it is, for the first time in the history of the world, probably 20% of the world went for a walk and they hadn't for 20 years. I don't know. I don't know that number. I just know it's massive. It's not 1% of people, because there's always a few percent who just experienced something and now want to do it for good. There is a huge number. There would be millions in most countries that have not engaged in physical activity that did for the first time in their adult life. And then they felt kind of good, because we all know the feeling. And I tell you what, just going for a walk, we all did it during COVID, right? If you all got locked up and you're going, oh my God, it feels so much good. Why was I not doing this more regularly? And that's even for people who do exercise, right? For someone who didn't exercise, imagine the feeling. And just remember that, because that's the thing you're going to sell to them. That feeling of, oh my God, I can actually feel good about myself, despite the craziness of COVID, despite my social well-being challenges, despite I lost my job. It's pretty challenging, or I'm going through a relationship breakup because of COVID and all the other shitty stuff that happens. All of those things will be true for lots of people. And we can be part of that solution on that journey to recovery.
I love that. I love going back to the basics of our industry, and I love the bit where you say, because you walked, you felt good. You did physical activity. Let's link that to that feeling of goodness, and now we can make that longer, better, more fulfilling.
And I'm just going to add one thing, and I know it's strange to talk about a negative. Notice I didn't talk about virtual. And I'm not saying virtual is not a thing, but everyone wants to ask me about virtual. Virtual can be a thing if it's part of your business.
Well, I'm not everyone. I don't want to ask you about virtual. I'm not going to talk about virtual.
Because you
talk about virtual.
You do good questions, JT. That's why you say you didn't. But everyone go, oh, virtual is the answer. And you go, virtual could be the answer, could be part of the solution. If it's not for you, that's okay. There is no one answer in this. So if virtual is an important part of your solution and you can do it well, go for gold. If you don't think it is, or you just don't think it's right for your product because you're a boutique and it's all about personal experience, it's okay. Wait it out. Engage with your clients, whether it's text messaging, maybe it is the odd Zoom session, but maybe you don't do any of that. And you just check in with them. You don't charge the money, you check in with them. And once you reopen, you go. Now, that will require some money and the ability to survive this. But once you get to that point, it's okay to not do virtual. And I almost want to say that to give people permission. It's okay. Now, if you want to do virtual, go for gold. I'm simply saying there are lots of people out there saying you have to do virtual. If you don't, pivot. Lovely expression. You know, if you don't go for the new normal, you have to go virtual. If you don't, you're going to die. They're wrong. They're absolutely wrong. Now, and the only reason they're wrong is they're saying it in an absolute sense. And the same reason I said this earlier to you, someone says you have to do yoga. Well, you're wrong. I love yoga. It's amazing. But no one has to do yoga in the same way that no one has to do HIIT training. Both of them are great. What's right for you at the moment may or may not be those things. Same with virtual. Virtual may be in your mix. I would not put it in the top priority to say I have to consider it. What I'd be looking at is what's my business? Where's my future? What are the long-term options for me personally and my business in the future? One thing I would like to finish with, I look at this industry and go, what's the long term? You know, the crystal ball in 10 years' time is really, really, really good. If I was in the newspaper, my long-term career is bad, and it was bad before COVID, and the COVID's the nail in the coffin. And no disrespect to anyone who works in the newspaper, good on you, but you might want to look for a new job. And the same thing if you work for an airline. Now, right now it's terrible. It's going to get a bit better, but in 3 years' time, is it going to be really good again? I really don't know. In 3 years' time, our industry is going to be pumping. In a new way with a little bit of nuance, but fundamentally with the same thing. We deliver great experiences for people and great results, whatever those results might be, aesthetic, health, whatever, social well-being. That is something you should never forget, because it's hard to remember that when you're closed and you're trying to pay your bills tomorrow and I can't even afford the rent, let alone the payroll, and I can't pay my own mortgage. I get that. That's shit. Excuse my language. I can't make that shit go away. I can give you hope for the future. I absolutely know without any doubt in 5 years' time, this industry will be robust. So your key, if you're in one of the countries where you're locked down for a really long time and you can't see even the light at the end of the tunnel, know that once you are at the end of the tunnel, it's going to be okay. And that's the key. Survive until then. If you're in New Zealand, it's like you got 2 weeks to go, right? It's shitty. We're closed. And in a couple of weeks, we'll reopen. It might be 2, it might be 4, but we know that's where it's at. And that's a different conversation. But even you're in the worst despair, you've been closed for 6 and it might be another 3. In 5 years' time, this is going to be okay. If you can survive the next 3, you will be good in 5 years' time.
I'd like to say, Richard, that social well-being and interaction with other human beings is built into our DNA.
Yeah.
And so there's always going to be a place for a club. A club. And a club for me is defined where people interact with each other. Now, that interaction may well be 1.5 metres away, but there is interaction. And for that reason, I agree with you that there will always be a place for gyms. There's whatever it looks like, there's going to be a need, because as humans, we are hardwired to want to talk to people and be around people. So I agree with you. I think sometimes it's pretty tough at the moment for Victorians, some people in the US, some states in the US, and even people in Auckland, you know, all throughout Europe, because you're not quite sure how long that tunnel is.
Yeah.
And there is a glimmer of light, but I think your point is extremely valid that when you get to the other end, that glimmer of light's actually a blinding light for the future. So, hey, this has been great. Thank you.
No, it's been good talking to you. It's been too long. I think, in these environments, if you don't talk for a week, it seems like forever.
Yeah, you're right. And before I let you bail, Exercise New Zealand, what have you got on? You mentioned it. You mentioned a face-to-face conference.
Yeah, that's a bit cool. We just finished our annual roadshow, which we renamed the At-Home Show, because we used to do a roadshow. You've been on it, JT, but for those listening, we go to 10 cities all around New Zealand, sort of one day in one city, next city, have a forum, have some education, bring some speakers with us. We thought that's probably not the best thing right now because we didn't know about the environment. Talk about a good call, because literally the day we planned it, we're doing a virtual one, was 2 days before the lockdown. So yeah, we dodged that bullet. Now, funnily enough, of course, we just did one of them. We didn't need to do 10. But it was great because we modified the message. We still had the same education content. So we had, funnily enough, 2 Australians were doing the presentations. But we also added in our sort of input in terms of where are we at with COVID, what are we doing to respond, how we engage with government. We had a really great panel discussion, but that was all virtual. And virtual's great, but I don't know how you feel about doing virtual education. You go, I'm kind of over it. And no disrespect, we run some of it. And I've seen some of it. It's fantastic. One of the best things is you can be at your home, you can be unloading the dishwasher while you're watching a session. Anyone that hasn't done that, they're lying, right? But especially when it's a webinar, because they don't see me. I can, they're talking. It's really hard as a presenter, but it's actually really easy as an attendee. But the thing we're missing is the human interaction. You said it before, what we do. So we decided that if we could run an event, we should walk the walk that we're saying to other people. We think that human interaction is important, then we'll do an event like that. Now, of course, we've got plan B. It will be virtual if for some reason we are legally not able to run it. But if we can run it with 100, we'll run it with 100. And we'll just say, hey guys, this is how it's going to work. And we're also cutting our cloth to fit the current environment economically. So even if you're going pretty well at the moment, most people don't want to spend a lot of money because I don't know about the future. It's not a good time to buy a brand new car because I don't know what my income might be next year. I'm probably okay, but I just don't know. So I'll just wait till next year and see how it happens. So our conference used to be like many, best part of $1,000. I think, discounted rate was $699. We've cut it back to $149. We've said, let's make this affordable. And funny enough, even though it's on one day, we give you 6 days worth of content because you can watch it later. And that's the one thing about virtual we never had before. When you went to a conference, we know I'd go to a conference and go, oh, damn, if I see JT, I can't see Chris Stevenson at the same time. Well, now I can. I'll go to his session and watch you virtually or do the other way around. Isn't that awesome? Yeah. So we're now saying you can come to this conference and get 6 days of content for $149. I'm not here to sell it to people other than saying we've just modified it. We're still, though, saying the key thing we want to do is live. Why? Because we believe there is a value in hanging around other people like you so you can just talk. I know myself, I've got a small home gym, and the only reason I did it because of lockdown. I used to own a gym, so I've got some old gym equipment that I basically threw in a spare room. But the interesting thing is, as soon as I could, I went back to the gym. Why? Because of half the, the bullshit chat, excuse my language again, that happens in the changing rooms of the guys who just go, oh, blah, 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 like the taxi driver.
Hey, don't
that
give
doesn't
away
happen in your country? What's that?
That's too much information about
it. I shouldn't share what happened. That's confidential, isn't it?
That's right.
Yep. I can tell you what, discussions in the sauna, it's like discussions in a taxi. People solve the world problems in saunas, you know that? Where they go, I'll tell you what's wrong with this country.
I love that.
But it's interesting. Again, it's human behavior. We want to interact. So we want to run a conference where you can interact with other people like you. Of course, for people that can't afford to fly in or just don't want to or don't feel safe or can't afford it, that's okay. We'll do it virtually too. But again, this is just us modifying our product to suit the environment, to suit the market, and our way of also giving back to the industry, because we do know right now the industry is hurting. Even those that are going really well, no one's saying we're making millions in this. And let's face it, none of us got in this industry for that reason anyway. So we think it's perfectly okay to say that right now, I'm toughing it out. It's really hard. Reach out to other people, whether that be another, a peer in your business. Maybe it is your boss, maybe it is your peer, or someone else that you just know, because right now we are in this together. I mean, some of the really good politicians, and Jacinda in our country, we just refer to them as Jacinda because it's his first name. Auntie Cindy is what. Because Donald Trump is just called Trump, right? So you don't call him Donald. But in New Zealand, everyone goes Jacinda. And it's like everyone knows Jacinda by her first name. And she's done an amazing job in making us part of the journey. And so one-on-one, we need that as well. We've done the sort of the journey as a political journey, 5 million, team of 5 million. But we also need this, hey, I need your help, and to reach out and say, hey, JT, I'm feeling like shit. In fact, I remember having a conversation with you probably 6 years ago when I was going through a really shitty time with a bunch of stuff was happening with a bunch of things and just basically to share to you and vent to you. And you didn't have an answer, but I felt a whole lot better talking to you about it. And I think it was an Ursa. Do you remember how many years ago it was? That.
Yeah. And for those that have met me 7 years ago, I was 6 foot then, and then Richard spoke to me 6 years ago. And he pushed me down to 5'6".
That was when you were 25 as well, was that right?
That's exactly right. But no, you're 100% right. Talking is really important, and I'm going to start using that social well-being phrase a lot more, Richard, because there is a negative stigma around mental health. But I think bringing people together and being able to connect is fantastic. If you can pull this off in November, amazing. For those that are watching from overseas, just allow yourself 14 days isolation before you plan on attending the event. So just make sure you get your flights booked early enough.
We won't let you in, I'm sorry. You've got to be a New Zealander. You can't come.
Oh, yeah, your border's shut, isn't it?
You're not even allowed. I mean, I'd let you in, but...
What if I could get in on my kayak?
You could try.
Yeah, no, it's a bit far to row.
Only a little kayak, right?
Only a little. Mate, thank you so much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. Love chewing the thin with you, always about all things industry. We will put the Exercise New Zealand website in the feed so people can check out what you do and who you are. We'll also put is there an ICREPS website?
Yeah, I see. It's very limited. It's not ultimately designed for exercise professionals. If you are looking for it, I'd look for the member in your country. So, if you're in Australia, you go to Fitness Australia. If you're in America, it's a slightly different model. So you go to the members of US reps. So it's ACE, ACSM. There's actually 6 of them. So sorry about the other 4 that I can't remember off the top of my head. But all of the major, or almost all of the major accreditation bodies are actually a member of what they call US reps. So that's how you go. That's the pathway in. So rather than ICREPS being the conduit, you actually go to your local person or your local registration body.
Awesome. Thanks, mate.
Good stuff. Good talking to you.
We'll catch you when the Wallabies finally beat the All Blacks later this year because the game's been cancelled.
You might have to hold your breath for a while, but that might be the only way you win.
That's exactly right. Yeah, ciao.
Bye, everyone.